Germans are hardworking, punctual, and duty-driven. Really? The classic trio of German stereotypes is starting to crack. Germany's chancellor Friedrich Merz, along with other leaders from his conservative party, argue that people in Germany simply aren't working enough anymore, and that this could put the country's prosperity at risk. For some, work-life balance has become a code word for laziness. At the same time, Germany's economy is barely moving, and the social welfare system is becoming more costly every year. But is a lack of work ethic really the problem? And what would it take to get the economy growing again? A look at Spain shows that growth is possible, in part thanks to immigration. Could that be a model for Germany? On To The Point, we ask, lazy Germany, is more work the way back to the top? Welcome to this week's To The Point. I'm Javier Arguedas. It's good to have you with us. Let's meet today's guests. Vendeline von Bredow is the senior Germany correspondent for The Economist, based in Berlin. John Kampfner is a British author, journalist, and specialist in foreign affairs, also based here in Berlin. And Henrik Müller is a professor of economic policy journalism at the Technical University of Dortmund and the author of numerous books on economic and monetary policy. To all of you, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. Vendeline, I'd like to start with you. The German economy, as we know, is not doing well. Gone are the days when it was Europe's powerhouse. How do you explain such a rapid decline?
Well, Germany's economy has been stagnating for the last few years. There's maybe some tepid growth last year of 0.2%, but that's hardly anything. I think the decline started even earlier, but there were four things. One is, of course, the war in Ukraine and higher energy prices. Two is the China shock. China is suddenly not the biggest export market, but really a rival. And the Chinese have become very good at things that Germans are traditionally good at, such as car making, solar panels, all these things. And thirdly, Germany has to spend much more on defense and used to rely a lot on the American security umbrella. And now, 3.5, maybe even 5% of GDP, which is a really big number, has to be spent on defense. So that's a whole rethinking of Germany's business model. And Germany is just grappling with all these shocks.
What Vendeline did not mention so far, John, are the Germans as a workforce, if you will. Germans have long been known for and sometimes even mocked for being overly focused on performance and efficiency. Germany's investment slogan up until a few years ago as an investment destination was Germany works. Does that stereotype still hold up?
It depends what area you're looking at. And I've always been a sort of Germany, the last man standing Germany justifier, and it must be said in the last few years that's been quite a hard position to take. I still am, and Vendeline pointed to the requirement now, not just from Donald Trump, but Germany seeing it for itself in terms of spending far more on defence and critical infrastructure. And I see that as a potential route out, because a lot of Germany's skills are based in advanced engineering and that side of things, and the redesignation of factories, the retraining of people in that area, notwithstanding, of course, the challenge and the opportunities of artificial intelligence. I do see that as a potential way through. But to your original question, Germany, if my facts are not wrong, has the shortest working hours in Europe, with the exception of a few tiny decimal points of the Dutch and the Norwegians, although most countries are roughly in the same place. It's not necessarily a question of how many hours you do, but how efficiently you work and what you're putting in and what you can afford. And it was Friedrich Merz in his very first statement to Parliament when he took office last May, who made it clear that this is an area he needs to tackle. But as ever in Germany, things happen slowly, and you've got to prize it through a difficult coalition.
Let's talk about what we're hearing from Germany's Chancellor, Henrik. We see a call from many camps for a change of mindset in the German workforce. What do you think needs to change in Germany's mindset?
I think that's pretty cheap talk by the Chancellor, because when he's calling German workers to action, he's also kind of misleading the public, I'd say, because the incentives that social security contributions in particular, or the disincentives they have, especially on workers with less than average incomes, are really disincentivizing them to work more. So there's a huge tax wedge, especially a marginal tax wedge, and that's way worse than in other OECD countries, for instance. So when you tell the German public to work more, I'd say, well, change something and make it worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a look at those benefits and at what Friedrich Merz thinks is too much here in Germany for workers. For decades, Germans were known as Europe's tireless workhorses, but as the country has grown wealthier, that image has started to fade. These days, the role models seem closer, at least according to some, to the Italian dolce far niente, the sweet art of doing nothing, or the French savoir vivre, the joy of simply living.
Working in Germany can sound like having your cake and eating it too. Part-time? Anyone is entitled to reduce the hours they work. This right is guaranteed by law. Almost 1/3 of employees do so, especially women. Sick? Often calling your doctor is all it takes. You can get a sick note for up to 5 days without going to the doctor's office. On average, Germans miss 3 weeks of work per year due to illness. Vacation? Everyone is entitled to at least 20 days. Often, it's much more. Further education? In almost all federal states, employees get an additional 5 days of educational leave paid. Unemployed? Employees who've worked for many years can receive unemployment benefits for up to 2 years. Retirement? If you've paid contributions to Social Security over the years, you can retire earlier. No need to hold out till 67. Altogether, too much of a good thing, says the Chancellor. A work-life balance and a 4-day week will not enable us to maintain our country's current level of prosperity in the future, which is why we need to work harder. Have the Germans become lazy and complacent?
John, I'm sure some of our viewers will think I could only dream of those conditions that we just saw in the report. You mentioned that it's not only how long Germans work, but also how they work. What exactly do you mean by that, and how do you assess the way Germans are working right now?
Well, the Brits, and I'm originally British, have often scoffed not so much at the Germans, but at the French for sort of never being at work and always finding a reason not to be at work. But yet French productivity is considerably high. I mean, Britain has had a productivity problem, the amount of work you do in the time that you are at work. And there is an argument, and I'm not sure I hold to it, that the more you work, the less you put in the hours that you do work. I mean, say that to the Japanese or others, it doesn't wash. So there's a productivity gap. But I mean, just one sort of funny anecdote. When my sister, who was visiting from San Sebastian in Spain, she's lived there 35 years, and we were walking across a beautiful bridge in the Berlin district of Kreuzberg called the Admiral's Bridge. And one beautiful summer's day, weeping willows, and everything was gorgeous. Last summer, she just shouted really loud, so everybody could hear, "Doesn't anybody do any bloody work around here?" And it was on a Friday afternoon. And you sort of get that sense of this sort of Entschleunigen, this sort of sense, particularly in the capital city. But I mean, Berlin has always had a strange place, partly through division and whatever else, of a place that doesn't actually produce very much. That's certainly what the myth, what the symbol of Berlin pertains to. I think you get a very different sense of Germany in other parts of the country.
The question, of course, Henrik, is whether that's the way to go, if that's what we want to aim for. Because it is true that many Germans, a significant portion of the working force, is working part-time only. And the Chancellor, for example, thinks that needs to end. What's your take on that?
Well, to put things in perspective a bit, is that the total volume of work that's being done in Germany is at an historical high. So it's way higher than it was in '91 when unification happened.
And productivity is quite high. right?
Yeah, but it's been shrinking a bit in recent years. And at the same time, we have a very high rate of employment in this country. Higher, to my knowledge, than the US, and probably the example of Spain that you mentioned. Of course, we have a lot of part-time work, and that has gone up pretty much. It's about 40% of the workforce, and that's mostly women, are working part-time, 19 hours a week on average, something like that. So that is part of the problem. But I think the problem that's really that we should really be talking about is going forward. Demographics are reshaping this country as elsewhere. Still, on average, people are retiring at 64. With the official retirement age being 66 and a half or something like that. So this is where the problem starts. And economic growth in the last decade at least has been driven by, or was driven by, a build-up of employment. That was the main driver of potential growth in this country. This is changing right now due to demographics. There is a lot of people leaving the workforce, and it is the baby boomers in this country, and the cohorts that are following are not big enough. So there's a huge gap, and we need to fill that somehow.
Yeah.
What solutions can there be for this problem? Because I don't hear on this table so far that putting Germans to work more is going to bring any type of solution to the problem.
Not necessarily. I mean, one part of the solution, I think, will be that we have to increase the retirement age probably to 70. I think that's not for all jobs, but I think that is definitely, you know, the idea of retiring at 62, 65 is just not, considering the demographics, not possible. As for the part-time work, I think it's not a lifetime choice, in particular for many women. It is that they have children, they have parents to take care of, they have often both, you know, and they would like to work more, but they can't. You also have to remember that German schools end at lunchtime. I mean, of course, there's after-school care, and there are but I mean, many women also feel they have to be around in the afternoon and help with the homework. I mean, it's different from Anglo-Saxon countries or France, where you basically, kids are at school all day. That's not the norm in Germany. So
also, is there not the question of tax and tax and tax splitting, and the whole idea of couples being taxed together rather than individually, which to me strikes me as incredibly old-fashioned and incredibly damaging, predominantly to women. The idea that actually, in terms of tax efficiency, for the second person in the couple, usually the woman who's usually earning less, it's not worth their while to work more. I mean, I've never understood why this has never been tackled in Germany.
So we agree that the conditions, especially for women, should be improved in other areas to allow them to work more, essentially.
To work full time, yes, yeah. But I would not end. I would not end the right to part-time work. You know, there is now a proposal to end the legal right to part-time work.
Yes.
Because
essentially, just to explain that your employer cannot deny you the right to work part-time in Germany.
Exactly. I think that's a good thing, because just for many women, that's the only way they can work at all.
I would like to briefly delve into the retirement age, because you mentioned that it should be increased. However, it is also true that finding work in the last years of your working life is very difficult. Does that need a change of mindset as well? Because a lot of people simply can't find jobs after, say, 55 or 60.
Absolutely, and employers are hesitant to employ somebody who is 55 or 60. They think, well, he may or she may come with health problems, and, you know, for lots of reasons. I think that requires a rethink, absolutely, because just look at the demographics. I mean, Germany is really aging rapidly. You know, boomers really are retiring now. Immigration can't make up for this, in particular at a time when the mood is not exactly favourable to immigration, the general mood, you know. So, you know, how do you change that? It's hard, right? And I also think somebody at the age of, I don't know, mid-50s, 60s will be very hesitant to change jobs because they will think, well, nobody will employ me. So I think there's still a rethink that needs to happen.
Henrik, Vendeline just mentioned health problems. That delves into another issue, according to the German chancellor. He says Germans call in sick too often. The OECD places Germany more or less in the average of OECD countries. Would it make sense to make it more difficult for employees to get paid sick leave for short absences?
Maybe. Of course, we've seen in the past that these figures have been lower. Like, I think in 2008 was an all-time low with, 7 days a year or so on average. So that may be a part of a solution. But I would think that the basic solution is that we should all work a bit more. I mean, if part-time workers would not become full-time workers, but work 4 hours more per week. If we retired at 66 and a half and not at 64 and a half, that would make a huge difference going forward without, needing huge reforms. So I think it's very much about the work incentives. And as I said, it's basically about social security contributions at the lower end of the income scale. And this is the really crucial point.
May I just ask, the Merz proposal that people in retirement can earn up to €2,000 a month tax-free, that to me strikes me as just falling into that category of being a small to medium-sized change that would actually, it won't obviously bring any money into the exchequer, but it might help solve some of those problems.
Well, it'll be very interesting whether that is changing social norms. We have had this, flexible retirement age for years now, but nobody's actually taking up this opportunity. So I think it has a lot to do with social norms and is it okay to retire early? What are your peers doing and so forth.
Briefly, John, when we're talking about small or big changes, we're still talking about Germany, which is a hard place to introduce any type of reforms, at least in the last few years. How difficult would it be politically to change anything of what we've been talking about?
Well, it's interesting that the aspect of the German post-war political constitution, consensus, collaboration and compromise, which was always seen as a strength, is now seen as a weakness. And that's probably a combination of the harder political climate, Donald Trump, authoritarianism, social media, and everything else. But it's always taken a while because German federal and state governments are necessarily coalitions of 2 or 3 parties. And in the CDU Social Democrat government now, in this particular area of social welfare, welfarism, employment rules, that's probably the biggest difference between the two. It's incredibly hard to get stuff through. But I'm much closer to the Merz viewpoint, even if it's sometimes in keeping with the man not particularly felicitously expressed.
We'll have a look, just briefly, we're just going to have a brief look at other examples from other countries, because unlike Germany, several crisis-tested southern European economies have recently been growing faster than expected. One standout example is Spain, which is projected to grow by up to 2.9%, helped in part by strong migration.
Queuing up for the necessary paperwork, Spain plans to grant legal status to around 500,000 undocumented migrants. The country knows what they bring to the table: labour. Since 2021, 1.2 million people have migrated to Spain. Many of them work in construction or tourism, sectors that have long struggled with staff shortages. There are many international voices that justify and explain the good performance of the Spanish economy, precisely because of this management of migration policy, which focuses on human rights and the contribution of foreign nationals in our country, who now represent more than 14% of the total number of registered workers. Spain generated almost 3% economic growth last year. Tourism remains a key driving factor. The country is one of the world's most popular travel destinations. Yet IT, finance and business services have long become important contributors to the economy as well. Spain's economic and migration policies, a model for Germany?
Times certainly do change if Germany is looking to Spain to follow up economic policies. Henrik, what does Germany need to learn from Spain?
I'm not sure if of course, we can learn something from Spain, but I don't think that this is the particular point. Because we've had immigration to the tune of net immigration of 400,000 since 2010. So there already is a huge influx of immigrants, and that's not just refugees; it's people from other European countries, basically. So we need to keep this up, but this is not gonna. This is not going to save us in terms of demographics.
It's also hard to compare because Spain has a far more positive attitude to immigration, but most of their immigrants, 75%, are from Latin America. So people who are culturally very close in terms of religion, in terms of language. It's just easier to integrate, Latin Americans into Spain. So that's one thing. And we can, of course, say, yes, Germans should also have a more positive attitude to immigration, but it's harder because it's just, it's hard to compare those two. The other thing is that Spain has relatively affordable energy. They have a huge amount of renewable energy, more than Germany. I think it's like at 60-70% of their energy needs because they have a lot of solar and wind. That is a huge advantage for the economy. I mean, we can try to get to that level, but it won't happen overnight.
The question, of course, is always integration, but also in a formal way. Do you think Spain is doing that better than Germany, formally allowing people to, get into the working force?
Spain also has a problem with bureaucracy, but it's maybe a little less. They've become more flexible. The labour market is a little bit more flexible than it is here. But it's not as flexible as it should be, let's put it like that. And Spain has another host of problems, for instance, with housing, with other things. But, of course, it is striking that Spain and I think Greece are now the fastest growing economies in Europe, and they used to be the laggards. So that tells you something.
They must have done something well. John, there's one maybe elephant in the room when we talk about possible solutions for the stagnating German economy, and it's a wealth tax. What do you make of that debate that is maybe not happening enough?
The problem with a wealth tax, which to me idealistically is absolutely the right thing to do, is that the people you need to go after, the super, super rich, are globally, their money is globally infinitely transferable at the flick of a switch and incredibly hard to trace. I remember, one of the great tragedies to me of the conclusions of the financial crash of 2007 and 8, and I think which has, I'm sort of going into a slightly different area, but it is relevant to your answer, produced this absolute groundswell of authoritarian right-wing politics in so many countries, is the sense that the people who brought the global markets crashing got away with it completely, 100% scot-free. There was a certain amount of financial regulation, but basically the people who stole the cream went off and got it. There is no way you are going to sort this, what I would regard as theft, by 0.00001% of people, not hard-working people who earn well. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about oligarchs. Is if you had a global coordinated campaign to do that. The problem is that doesn't happen because you have offshore locations where they can always siphon off their money.
And yet we often, yes, of course, just I'm going to ask you to that. We often see those numbers of how much money the state is losing by not taxing the super rich. Vendeline, do you think those numbers are not accurate then, according to what John just said?
Yes, I think I basically think wealth taxes are a poor idea because they do not work. And there's a lot of empirical evidence. Lots of OECD countries had wealth taxes in the 1990s. More or less all of them have abolished them for precisely that reason. First of all, they raise less money than assumed, so the figures are probably overstated. Then it's very hard to value wealth. What exactly do you tax? And third, and John mentioned that argument, the rich have a tendency to simply leave, and you see that now in California, where a wealth tax proposal is under consideration, 5% of wealth, is that people like Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Peter Thiel have started to leave California. And then, of course, they pay a big proportion of income taxes in the state. California would lose out net, if all these rich people, or many of them, left. So I can see why ideologically it might be attractive, but the past has shown, empirical evidence shows it's not working and has many unintended consequences. So I think there are other ways to raise funds for the state. In France, for instance, the example where they had debated a wealth tax last year and then abandoned the idea, they, for instance, have to raise the retirement age, maybe increase VAT, but a wealth tax is not the way forward.
The question, of course, what is the way forward? Henrik, I have time for one final question to you. The EU leaders want to increase competitiveness driven by Germany and France. If you had one tip for them, what would it be?
I think we need a labor agenda. And this involves work incentives, especially for part-time workers, but also the higher retirement age. And also, it's about education, research, stuff like that. And this is all, these are areas that are under pressure right now. So we need a work agenda. That's the only way we will find people who invest in this country, I guess.
I have time for one final round of questions to you. Just a yes/no question. Vendeline, I'll start with you. Do Germans really need to work more?
On balance, yes.
Of course.
Pretty much everybody in all wealthy countries do, because everybody else is catching up.
Okay, there seems to be consensus on that on this table. Thank you very much to all three of you, and of course to you for watching. We'll see you next time, and remember, you can always watch our shows on YouTube. Just search for DW News and the latest To The Point show. I'm Javier Arguedas. Till next time, take care and goodbye.